Another accolade for Tops and Trends, Jesse, is they actually one year won Inc. 500, one of the top businesses.
Serious. That's a big deal.
So
Yeah.
we were the 407th fastest growing company in the country.
And it was like one of I'd been to see him a couple times, but now I got introduced to Pro. So I came to the party and it was that year that you won. And I remember you going on stage and getting that award. And I said, man, one day, I want to be that guy getting that award. One day.
And this is being really candid and really honest. We sat around and tried to educate dealers to where we could offer an opportunity for them to make profit.
Welcome to the Ride and Style Podcast, your turbocharged pit stop for automotive restyling. Buckle up with Jesse and Josh.
All right. Welcome back to another episode of Ride and Style. We got a special guest today, Joey Johnston, Tops and Trends owner, 3 locations in North Carolina. Hi, Joey. How are you?
Hey, how's it going, guys?
And Josh here, as usual, my co-pilot
What's up, everybody?
at the Auto Editions. And are you in, I think you're in, is it Westerville, Ohio, or somewhere close to Columbus, right?
Yeah, it's basically Columbus. It's a suburb of Columbus. So Buckeye State, Columbus, Ohio. Yeah, Ohio State Buckeyes. Yeah, hated by the world. We're all
Right.
here. Yeah.
And I'm calling out of Seattle area. So been here for a little while. I'm actually north of Seattle, just for the record. I don't want to live in Seattle. Nobody does anymore. I'm halfway to Canada.
Oh,
So we actually go to Vancouver, British Columbia for fun instead of Seattle. Okay, hey, how about we do this, Joey? If you could describe your background, a little intro for yourself, and kind of your journey into the auto restyling industry. I think that'd be a great place to start, if that's okay with you.
Okay, sure. Well, it's a family business and one that, for those that have ever worked in a family business, probably can attest to that. After you've done it for a while as a kid, you learn early on that you want to do anything but work in a family business when you get older. And so, uh, after growing up, from probably the ages of 9 or 10, watching my dad work on cars, through high school, and working on projects, I enjoyed working with my father. He's a really talented man, mechanical engineer. So he had a really good understanding of how things went together, and things of that nature. But so, my background was just, grew up always, that generation where, you delivered papers, mowed yards, and then, worked with my parents. And so, um, you know, it was a lot of fun, but I knew that, when I got older, I was like, I'm not sure this is where I want to be. And so I went to school and, ultimately, became a finance major and stockbroker. And after a couple years, I figured out that, maybe working for the family business wouldn't be a bad idea after all. So that's kind of how I got back into it. And that was in 1994, 5, and been doing it ever since.
Mm. It's so speaking of your dad, Mr. Joe Johnston Sr., Jesse, he won SEMA Pro Lifetime Achievement Award. What was it, 2 years ago, I believe?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think a couple of
And
years ago.
yeah, we lost him 2 years ago as well. So
Sorry to hear that.
very one of the titans of our industry for sure. Because what year did he start the business, Joey? Roughly
1977.
1970. And I told you, Jesse, the industry really took off in the 80s and 90s. So he was there at the very forefront. Very forefront.
Yeah, he was there with the guys, like the Jerry Rollmans,
Yeah.
and some of those guys that, it's 2 of the original 20 group members and some of those folks. One of our friendly competitors down in Fayetteville is a company called CC Top Shops, and Charlie Crumpler Sr., he started his business recovering Cadillacs and Lincolns vinyl types in a horse barn. So, that again, back to the, the generational thing, those people did a lot with, they did a lot with a little.
Yeah. Yeah. They didn't have all just quick internet with all the products we have now and a SEMA show to go find whatever they need to do. And maybe you could tell the folks how your dad kind of got into the sunroof business. I love this story.
And so it was kind of interesting. I mean, my dad was always, a mechanic, a wheeler dealer, from the sense that he liked to buy cars. Kind of especially, I think, for a while was it Volkswagens, whether it be Beetles or, microbuses, and would fix them up. They were pretty easy to work on and sell them for a profit. my grandfather was a mechanic, worked for the Army at Oak Ridge, Tennessee, where they developed the nuclear bomb, actually. And so, we just kind of had a history of being able to work on things. My dad was growing up as a kid, he was a boat mechanic, working on outboard engines. So he enlisted in the Navy, served his time there, and then came out. And my dad has always says one of the best things that ever happened to him was the GI Bill. The GI Bill allowed him to go to college, and he went to school, got his degree, worked for a railroad for a brief period of time in Atlanta, and then came to North Carolina, which is where we're from originally, and began working for a couple of textile companies. And my dad bought a 1976 Pontiac Grand Prix, and he wanted a sunroof that he had seen when he was traveling on the West Coast, because in his work with textiles and logistics, he had to go to the West Coast a lot. He noticed that a lot of the new trends, if you would, were on the West Coast. So things that were happening out there in California, we hadn't even seen here on the East Coast. And again, like Josh mentioned, that's back before the internet, right? So, there's no, just jump on a computer and look to see what's happening. I mean, you saw it either on TV or a magazine. And so he bought this Grand Prix and he said, man, I've seen these sunroofs and I really would like to have one, but nobody around here did it. He called, he went to dealerships, he asked, and nobody did it. And Dad said, I think I could put one of those in. And so he went to the library, and back then you had business directories. I think the Ward's directory and some of those others. And he basically researched who made sunroofs, and then got on the phone and called around and found that the closest distributor was in Atlanta, Georgia. A gentleman by the name of Bob Jernigan, who a lot of us that have been in the business for a while know Bob. He had a company called Atlanta Auto Accessories, and Bob's retired now, but my dad called down there and said, hey, listen, guys, I'm interested in a pop-up sunroof. I'd like to buy one. And Bob said, well, we don't sell retail. And you can't buy one, you got to buy 12. My dad said, but I only need one. I don't need 12. Bob said, well, that's just kind of the way it works. And so my dad, I guess, hung up from that call and started thinking. And so he said that went a couple of weeks, and he said, man, I really want that sunroof. And so he went and called on a number of the dealers in the Greensboro market and said, hey guys, here's some information on pop-up sunroofs. Do you like this? And would you ever put those in if somebody could do it local? And they're like, yeah, we kind of like that. And so the Pontiac dealership said, we'll take one or two. The Honda store said they'd take a couple, and, so forth and so on. I think the Ford dealership took one. And so my dad had about half of the 12 that he was going to have to buy sold during that weekend of going out and talking to people. And so, a couple of days go by, and he calls back to, Bob Jernigan, and says, okay, I'd like to put 12, on order, but here's the deal. I'm going to come down there, and I'm going to want to watch you put one in. And then I want to put one in a car that I'm driving down there, and then I'll drive back with the other 11. And so my dad had I think it was a 72, 73 Honda Civic, took the passenger seat out of the Honda Civic, drove to Atlanta, watched their installer put one in, then put one in the Honda Civic, and drove back with the other 11. And that's how we got in business.
So literally, I can just picture him driving back on the freeway, looking over, if there was a freeway, and there's 11 pop-up sunroofs sitting at where the passenger would be.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you got to remember that little Civic was super small,
Yeah.
so he had they were stacked, from basically floor to ceiling, and then behind him as well. So, pretty comical sight, I'm sure. I wish we had a picture to look back on, because that would have been
That's
fun.
great. Joey, I have a question. You mentioned that at first, when you were younger, you were thinking, I don't want to be in the family business. Then you went out and had the journey into finance, and then you decided to come back. It wouldn't be so bad. Why did you decide that? And how'd you overcome that? What was the transition like to start working for your dad? And, I'm curious what that relationship was like. Was it easy? Was it tough? Was it challenging? What happened there?
Probably all the above. I mean, so growing up, as kids, anybody that tells you otherwise is just lying, in my opinion. Because you know what, if you've got good parents, and I did, and I do, they're tough on you, right? They want you to be, have it better than they did. But my family was one that they wanted you to earn it, and my dad was really demanding. And again, he was highly intelligent, far smarter than me. And when we would work together, the interesting thing about it would be he was almost like a doctor in the sense that when we would work on cars, I would go out on the weekends and we put pop-up centers in together. And after the first weekend, the second weekend, I remember, my dad, we would be there working, and he had gotten into a routine. Again, as an engineer, his job was actually to set up production floors so that the equipment was in the right place so that the machinery could operate as efficiently as possible. So he was a very much assembly line mentality. And even though he was a one person, one man band, he had it figured out. And, back in the early days, he was part time. He kept a full time job to do the work he did. And so he would go to work in Winston-Salem. And then when he would get off work, he literally would have a pair of coveralls in his car, and he would literally still be in dress clothes, penny loafers on, in coveralls, going into dealerships to get the keys for a car that he'd be working on from, 5:30, 6 o'clock until, 8 or 9 o'clock that evening when he got done. And then he would come home for dinner. So, that tells you a little bit about kind of the work ethic he had. He worked Saturdays, Sundays. He loved NASCAR, so he'd watch a race, but it wasn't beyond him to work 6 or 7 days a week. And in the later years, his office had a couch in it, and there's many nights he slept on the couch so he could be, finish a car that was due out and be at the office the next morning. So, but so I think that helps you understand kind of where I came from. My dad was demanding, and when we would work on cars, he would expect me to almost, I used to, as a kid, read my mind. Like when he cut the hole, he was expecting me to have, a set of tin snips in my hand, wave the hand to him. And then when the hole was cut, if we were going to prom the edge or butyl next, whatever it was, I was supposed to basically be his assistant. And as a kid, as a teenager, I mean, I've been fortunate to have some great kids, but they don't get that, right? And I didn't get it either. And so, I'm sitting here going, Dad, you want me to read your mind? And he's like, yeah, I want you to know that we've done this job several times and you should know what's next.
Mm.
And that was tough. And, he approached everything that way, and he was teaching me. I just didn't know he was teaching me.
Yeah.
And so you ask, the question, how do, I get to where I'm at now? Well, when you're a kid growing up and you've got that kind of expectation, you're like, man, maybe I'd like to do something a little bit differently with less expectation. And
How
so
many times did you get fired?
Oh yeah, you remember that story too. So I remember one summer I fired 3 times. And the first one was talking back to the shop foreman. That got me fired. And then I talked my way back into the job about a week and a half later. And then I was mowing the grass, and my dumb self had the exit chute pointed towards the cars in the parking lot. And so I'm blowing grass on the cars.
At least
And,
no
not
rocks.
thinking about, no rock. And my dad walks out and goes, "Hey, what are you doing?" I said, "I'm mowing the grass." Basically, "Hey, you don't do that." And I'm like, "It's just grass." And he said, "But it could be something else." And we had a discussion. Then I got fired. And so, and then I think he kept me out of work for like 3 weeks, before. But, back then again, I hate to keep referencing it, but, I had to make my own spending money. So, I wanted to have spending money. So I was like, and I only could mow 2 or 3 yards back home, so I wanted to be working. And, as I understood it, it got better. And I remember in high school, we did a zone package with Oldsmobile. We'd been really fortunate that, once we went into this thing full time, we nailed down a zone package, and we did 3 or 4 of these, and we're talking 400 cars. These cars would go to the Charlotte race to be part of the kickoff. And I remember that my dad needed to get a lot of cars done, and I had learned a fair amount, and we were doing ground effects and hood scoops and things like these on Cutlasses. And so I got a couple of my buddies from high school together. My dad said, "Here's what we're going to do. We're going to pay you per unit, not per hour."
Hmm.
And I remember that me and one of my friends, David Adams, and another guy, we went over there in one weekend. And this is back in, we're talking 1983, 84. We all made over $500 in one weekend installing ground effects and things like that. So,
You were rich.
put that into,
Oh yeah.
yeah, put that in today's dollars, right? But, we did the work. We came up with a system, and it, it paid off for us. So, So that's, I guess, who made, my dad and mom, really taught me a lot of great lifelong skills, that, I'll never forget. And hopefully, I've done a decent job of passing some of that knowledge down to my
It's
kids.
almost like an apprenticeship program, like a very old fashioned, without you even maybe realizing you were in one.
Oh, well, yeah. No, yeah. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Donald Trump and the Apprentice gang got nothing on me. So,
You're fired.
yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. I heard that a lot.
So so tell everybody the products you were doing back then in the late 70s, 80s. What were the big products that you mentioned a few of them, but your dad was installing?
Yeah. So, back then it was pop-up centers was key, right? That's what we kind of started on. We ran our business part-time with pop-up centers. Yeah. Again, Pop would put a couple in the evenings, 4 or 5 on the weekends. And then we bought enough pop-up centers that we actually became a distributor. So we actually started then distributing pop-up centers to other folks. We did vinyl top simulated convertibles, became big back then. Ground effects were a thing, real Rid X spoolers. And then we also did, early days, we did target conversions. So we were converting RX-7s, putting targets in those, Toyota Celicas. We were doing some of those. We did turbocharging back in the day, again, because of my dad's
Turbocharging.
mechanical building. Yeah. So we had an RX-7 indigo blue with a target top and a turbo putting out about 12 pounds of boost in a rotary engine. And my dad loved nothing more than when he went to Myrtle Beach, he would just absolutely eat people's lunch up in that sleeper vehicle.
So how many of those products that you did back then are you still doing today?
It's funny. Yeah, we just talked about that. My mom and I were talking, how much things change, until just recently, you couldn't even buy a pop-up sunroof in North America.
It's
Um,
true.
and, you know, simulated convertible types. I was talking to, a friend of ours, Josh, Ralph George, and I said, you still doing any of those? Because he's in that kind of, land of retirement down there in South Florida. And he's like, nope.
Oh,
And,
wow.
we just, we do a recover every once in a while. So, again, pop-ups gone, simulated convertibles for the most part gone, ground effects for the most part gone, uh, replaced with power sunroofs, back in those days, leather interiors and things like that. But, the business is always changing, but yet, a lot of us that go to SEMA year in and year out say it changes, but it still kind of stays the same, right?
Yeah.
Well, over the years, since I mean, there's a lot of history here, not just with your dad, but you've had a lot of history in this too. What are some of the biggest challenges you've faced in the industry, and how'd you overcome them?
You know, I think things for us, you know, might have been a little bit, different because I think we worried about things that other people didn't worry about. Um, you know, my dad was good at sales. He was good at negotiations. My mom was good at sales. And even though she was a nurse, when she came into the business full time to actually start selling, she was good at it. She was a natural. We didn't worry about selling product and installing product because my dad was so talented. We worried more about the long run, like for example, liability. When we're doing a target top, and you're cutting the A and B pillars in a vehicle, what's the chances that that customer may have an incident where they're in an accident? And I don't think a lot of people thought that way back then. We sat on the sidelines for probably 3 or 4 years when leather interior first came out. When airbags became an issue, because we were like, you know what? I'm not sure that we're really comfortable with the aftermarket's approach on how they're doing airbags and things of that nature. Um, Power sunroofs, very similar. I mean, again, there's been multiple companies in the power sunroof business over the years. ASC is who we started with, and then you had Hollandia Webasto. You've had Ison, Skytop. You have a number of guys that have been in it, but we really only felt like one company really actually had the wherewithal and the the asset base and the testing base to put in a product that was good, and that was Webasto, and their OE contracts kind of spoke for that. So you know, we look at a lot of that. When we're doing installations, we want to think about what's the long-term ramifications of what we're doing. We had a customer call us just yesterday and said, "Hey, will you put in this adaptive cruise?" And we're like, and he's like, "It's a Ford aftermarket part." And we're like, "Well, you said Ford aftermarket." So I listened for about 30 seconds and said, "No." You know, the the fact of the matter is, I just think that, all of us, if we want to have a long-term business, we live in a litigious society. And you have to think, um, you know, is it something I'd want to put my family in? Would I want to put my son or daughter in that vehicle after I work on it? And, and two, if you're looking out for the customer, the business is always going to be okay.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good philosophy. Did you guys have any significant failures over the years that you had to bounce back from and maybe learn from? Anything that you could address there? F- Learning
You know,
lessons, I guess.
I
Learning lessons, failures.
Oh, I mean, I think we're always learning. At the end of the day, when you come in, and you think, anytime you think you've got it all figured out is about the time you're ready to really screw something up. So, you know, and I think we're all guilty of that. But I think for the most part, we were pretty methodical about things. We all get caught kind of off guard, whether, it's something as simple as, you open up an email and next thing you know, you've got a virus worming its way through your database and all of a sudden you can't produce invoices and you don't know what 3 months worth of history of accounts receivable is. I mean, we had a small issue with something like that one time and you just learn from it, right? Um, we've made bad hiring decisions, but anybody that's a business, owner and employs people's made bad hiring decisions. So, I'd like to say if I could think about any one huge mistake I've made, um, I've had lots of, anecdotal stories. I remember that when we bought a classic soft trim branch in Raleigh, we had a week, basically, preparatory period when we went in and we worked with their current staff and they were going to close the branch down. And the staff didn't know that, but we knew that going in. And so we went in and, we basically watched the operation trying to get a feel for the people. And they had some good folks and some folks that, probably wouldn't have wanted to keep on. And so at the Friday, we made an offer on the business. We agreed on the price, we bought the business, and we agreed on 2 of the 5 employees coming to work for us. And between Friday and Monday, those 2 employees decided they were going to go work somewhere else. So I laugh at the fact that we bought a business, committed to a lease, and had no employees working for us when we started on Monday.
Yeah, that's a problem.
Yeah.
Wow.
So, but we've been there, done that. I mean, we've had operations before where, where we've been in that situation. When we bought a gentleman out that came to work for us in Asheville, and it was a small store, and his son was one of the primary workers. And when his son went off, we didn't have we didn't have a tech. We had a salesperson and no tech. That's not good, right? So, we basically managed that office for about 9 months remotely, mobile. We would go pull seats. So yeah, I think a lot of times, if you got lemons, you make lemonade, right? And so, we've always been of that mindset that there is a solution to almost every problem. You just got to think about it.
Yeah. How did you grow from one store to 3?
You know, for us, that was probably my parents did not want more than one store. Yeah. My dad, again, simple man in the sense that he said, the happiest day and the saddest day of his life was the day he hired an employee. And I said, what do you mean? He goes, well, it really wasn't that day, but it was the day that I had a customer call and say they weren't happy about something.
Yeah.
And I relate it back to hiring that employee. He said, the fact is that if you're not doing the work, there's always going to be a variable in what that other person did, even though you teach them to the best of your ability. And so, my dad over the years, when we actually opened our second store, we had about 60 employees at that point, and we knew the Raleigh market was a good market. We were doing some work in it, but from a standpoint of you had to be there, you can only, Josh, as you can only service so far off in our business, and we've always actually extended our reach probably further than most, 2.5 hours away is not uncommon for us, but we knew that that was a growing market at the time. It was, demographically speaking, good income ratios. It had high growth with that RTP area. So we knew that we needed to be there. But my parents were at the point in their career where they said, "Hey, we've made the money we need to make. We're comfortable. But if it's something you want to do, we'll back you in that endeavor." And so that's kind of how we went from 1 to 2 stores. And then the third store was an acquisition that worked out well. And then our fourth store in Roanoke was just a new venture that we started from scratch. But I tell people, and Josh, you've heard this story. I know some of the other guys in our 20 group have heard it, but going from 1 to 2 damn near killed me. It is an absolute beast to try to run 2 locations in our line of work because of the just high degree of technical expertise that's required. When I went from 2 to 3, I didn't miss a beat though.
Mhm.
You know, and so I think, a lot of shops, and this is really unfortunate, and it goes to the point of, something we touched on earlier is a lot of shops are suspect. And I know people that are good people, but they were held hostage by the back of the house. And when I say that, you had technicians that would want to put in a subpar product because it was easier, right?
Mhm.
Suners are a good example, and they wouldn't want to put in a product that was harder but better because it took longer or whatever the case may be. And my sense that's the tail wagging the dog, and you don't want to ever be in that situation. And where I'm going with this is that once you get to a critical mass where you have enough good technicians, then you can be confident if you have to let a technician go or you have to call the herd because you know that the wheels aren't going to come off the proverbial wagon, if you would.
Yeah.
And so when you get to that point, to grow your operation gets easier. Um, but for a lot of smaller shops, you've only got one guy that does leather, one guy that does electronics, one guy that does sunroofs. And so you know, you've got to be a good manager, right? You've got to, and be a good leader. Getting people to follow your desires and things is not easy.
How have you dealt with or navigated all these challenges with the supply chain issues and the low dealership inventory, just the economy in general, and how it's impacted the industry? Are you seeing much there where you're at? Do you notice it?
I think, all of us have seen, and again, this, COVID was an interesting time, right? You saw low inventory levels. With record high demand for the inventory levels that were present. And yes, we saw supply chain issues. And I think, again, a lot of it is you have to be um, proactive and not reactive in any business. And ours is no different, right? If you see something coming or you get an inclination and you've got the asset base to do it, you tend to try to stock up. We would try to keep materials. We were never one to say, hey, I'm going to keep one video system on hand. Well, if I think I'm going to use 4 or 5 in a month, I'm going to have 6 or 8 on hand. Um, and again, not everybody can do that, but we tended to stock more product. We tended to try to help insulate ourselves prior to COVID, prior to some of the issues we're running into now. Um, and so that helps, right? But not everybody can do that. But again, you can't just think about today. You got to think about tomorrow.
Right. Right.
And so, yes, we've been impacted by it. But I think you just have to have a good long range plan. And even then, the best plans, things happen. So, trust me, we've been suspected, part shortages, again, a lot of OE parts too, where you may be 2, 3 months before you get that part back.
Mm. It's tough. Another accolade for Tops and Trends, Jesse, is they actually one year won Inc. 500, one of the top businesses.
Serious. That's a big deal.
Yeah. What
Yes.
what year was that roughly?
Yeah. Oh, so I think that was in 88. Pretty sure it was 88.
88.
So
Yeah.
we were the 407th fastest growing company in the country.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
so and you have to, you have to send in all your, financials, and it's pretty big to do. You go to an event, with all these folks. And again, I didn't go, my parents went. And they with the governor and things of that nature. So it was a neat, it was a neat time. And so, and if you look at some of the companies that have been on that list, some of those are now not incorporated 500 companies, they're Fortune 500 companies.
Yeah.
We didn't have that same luck, but that's okay. We're in a good spot.
No, I mean, so
It's a
go
big deal
ahead.
just to get on the Inc. 5000 list, by the way. So Inc. 500, that's pretty elite. That's pretty awesome. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It
Well,
was for all the sunroof installers in North Carolina. They made top 500. No, I'm joking.
yeah. Yeah.
No, it just
Well,
shows
no,
that,
no,
go
Josh,
ahead.
it was North and South Carolina. I
Oh,
know you
North
like
and
to
South
lump those
Carolina
two
were
together.
included. Okay. Probably a little bit of Tennessee, I bet too. But
Maybe Southern Virginia too while you're at it.
yeah. But, I mean, think about this, Jesse. Most second generation owners and businesses fail. And there's a big reason behind that, like Joey talked about, because maybe they don't have the drive, the work ethic, the know-how, the understanding, the just the desire, the care. But to Joey's credit, he didn't even have a brother or sister to do this with. He had two parents that were actively running this business. Then he takes over, and think about that, to grow up from what it was, an Inc. 500 company, and then to say, okay, we're going to branch out, we're going to get out of our comfort zone, we're going to go do a second location, a third location, open up some new spots, really diversify in your real estate, your buildings, and keep on top of that to the point where now, they're the main retailer in North Carolina. So kudos to you, Joey, for I'm sure it doesn't go without hard work, and I'm sure your wife at times goes, yeah, the stress level is there, but kudos to you and your team.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. Family businesses have, you've always got family to depend on, and that means that you can depend on them to have your back and stab you in the back too. And they don't mean to stab you in the back. It's just family always has a lot of ideas on how things ought to work, and so not having a brother or sister is not something I aspired to, but it did make certain negotiations a little bit easier. From the standpoint that I didn't have to convince. But again, my mom and dad were pretty interesting in the sense that when we would have discussions, we kind of agreed early on that it was kind of a democracy. And sometimes my mom and I would align, and sometimes my dad and I would align, and sometimes my mom and dad would align. And so, the chips fell where they may. And you don't often hear that. I've got a lot of friends that have family owned businesses in other areas and other industries. And a lot of times there's a big struggle, where, the mom or dad don't want to give up control. And, I'm not going to tell you that my parents wanted to give up control. They didn't. My mom still, there's a pretty fine line between what gets said and what gets done, when it comes to her location. But, for them, they always, and I was really fortunate, they always supported my desire to grow the business and the vision that I had. And we really operated well in that space. And I will say that's probably not the norm for a lot of people.
You guys have a broader perspective than I think a lot of business owners would, just because of that multi-generational thing. And you sort of talked about it already, but how have you seen the industry change since you first got involved, and more importantly, where do you see it heading in the future? I know you don't have a crystal ball, but I would love to hear your thoughts on that.
I think, there's always going to be something that's going to upset any marketplace, right? And the old saying, if you're not growing, you're dying. And so for us, the challenge has been, we go to the SEMA show, which is coming up here very shortly, and 1st of November, and we go out there to see what's the new product. And we struggle in the restyling business to find that new product over the last, probably, Josh, what do you say, 4 to 5 years, maybe even a little bit longer. We've really struggled with what's that new product. I mean, we've had some things that have garnered some interest, whether it be things like some ADAS products like Blind Spot, and things of that nature. But there's not been that really powerful product like leather was 20 years ago, or sunroofs or ground effects. You've not had that product where everybody has to have. Now, you've had some things like, I'd say vehicle wraps are probably one of the things that maybe a lot of the restylers have got into, that has been helpful. Window tinting's always been around. You've got some restylers kind of delving into that market. Some guys doing some of the van and fleet work. But, we're all kind of standing it around looking at each other, trying to figure out what's going to be, that next step. And then as you look at EVs, being a greater and greater market share of what's being sold, and, so much of the technology being integrated into the vehicle from the factory, where does that leave us? Right. And I think that, that's a struggle, and a lot of people are not good at change. And that's unfortunate, because they don't know where to go. And so what happens is I see a lot of restylers, and I see a lot of businesses in general, they just keep doing the same thing over and over again. And then before you know it, they're on a dead end path, declining revenue, stagnant sales, whatever it may be. And then you've got a workforce that, most of them are smart enough to know when they're on a ship that may not be, afloat for much longer. And I'm not saying that our bid, but again, we have to recognize that we have to go out and find new opportunities for growth in our industry. And, the traditional, for many of us as restylers, it was always the dealership. And, that the dealers are making record profit right now. So, and have been for the last 3 to 4 or 5 years. And so, when somebody's doing really well, when you ring the doorbell, they don't always come to the door because you know what? They're busy. They're busy going and printing money and taking it to the bank.
How do you stay up to date, like with the latest trends and all the technology? Is it? I mean, you have to rely a lot on the manufacturer's rep or somebody or connections or just SEMA or reading magazines or the web or like how are you keeping up with all this stuff?
Well, it's funny, reps play a very small part of what, I do from a, I guess, a research standpoint. I mean, it used to be huge, right? It used to be you depended on your rep to come by and show you open up his suitcase and show you his latest wares. And, you know, Josh, I don't know about you, but, if I get visited by a rep, from some of the biggest suppliers I work with more than once a year right now, I think somebody's about to, something must be wrong.
Yeah. And it used to be twice or once a year, but then COVID came and they're like, "Oh, we can just do all this on Zoom or just email, so we'll just never leave our house."
Yeah, and listen, we're enjoying this discussion probably from our home, and so yeah, there's a place for that. But yeah, I mean, to your point, Jesse, about how I get information, that's we're all guilty of it. If we're a business owner, and especially if we have a sales mentality, we like to talk more than we listen. My grandmother, I come from a family that's full of stories, as Josh will tell you. There's always a joke or always a story. But my grandmother said there's a reason why God gave you two ears and one mouth. You're supposed to listen twice as much as you talk. And I don't do it very well, but I know that you're supposed to. And so when you want to learn, you listen to people that know more than you. So I try to listen to I read a lot. Pretty much my morning routine is, I typically read a lot of publications. I read automotive news. I try to talk to the dealers. I try to see what's going on. Um, but yeah, I mean, magazines, but again, almost everything's went digital, right? So, I don't do a lot of, publications like we used to read, but so I would say going to the dealer lots, trying to identify things, and that's where I'm probably weak. I used to be pretty good at it. Josh probably would tell you the same thing. We used to walk that dealer lot, right, pounding the pavement and trying to read window stickers and see where the opportunities were. And, you know, I think there's a lot of gold in them hills, but people don't do it anymore, us included, like we should. Catskin, again, to give them some credit, I think they do as good a job as anybody with trying to help identify opportunities within the menu of vehicle trim levels to help give restylers a good opportunity to find things that they can work with. And if more manufacturers would invest the resources to do that, I think restylers could do better. But now that's a chicken and egg story, right? Which comes first, right? Is it the reseller's job to go out and find the opportunities, or is it the manufacturer's job to go out and find the opportunities? You could argue it either way, but at the end of the day, I guess it's the person that wants to be the most successful is the one that's going to grab the bull by the horns.
Yeah, that's good. You got now with
Well, let me tell you another thing, Jesse, about tops and trends. Uh, let me guess, 2006, was it 2006 when Tops and Trends won Restyler of the Year? Maybe it's
Has it
04,
been that
05?
long?
I think
I don't know if it's been that long ago, but
so.
yeah, it's. I mean, and then
So
again, as you get
a
older,
very
Josh,
SEMA prestigious award. You can only win it one time. That's why it's been so long. But I mean, you can only win it one time. So, when I was kind of coming up in the business, I remember, I think I was there. Funny story. I don't know if I've even told you this, Joey. It was November Fest. That's what they called it. So we had a little pro party in the at the SEMA show in the Westgate Lounge, and I remember my wife and I were there, and it was like one of my. I'd been to SEMA a couple times, but now I got introduced to pro. So I came to the party, and it was that year that you won. And I remember you going on stage and getting that award. And I said, man, one day, I want to be that guy getting that award one day. And then funny enough, like the next year, I don't know whether it was, did you ever sell Amway? Because you invited me to the pro meeting and I felt like it was an Amway thing. So he invited me to pro. He's like, what are you doing tomorrow? I was like, I don't know. What are you doing tomorrow at 7:30 in the morning? I'm like, probably sleeping. He goes, no, come to this pro meeting. And so Joey was on pro before I was ever even introduced. So he invited me to the pro meeting. And then I thought we were going to be selling Amway later, but he never did bring up the Amway thing. And then I also asked him, how much of my business are you getting? Are you making a piece of me off of this pro thing? He said, no. It's all about just networking and everything like that. So Joey's the one that created the problem child that you see before you, Jesse.
Awesome. It's your fault then. Awesome. Now we know.
Yes.
The Frankenstein.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Josh doesn't listen very well. Getting back to that analogy of listening
Yes.
twice as much as you talk, because I told him, hey, listen, this pro thing, it's a volunteer gig. It doesn't pay anything. And, back when I was doing it, SEMA was through one of their cyclical spells. We were in the bottom. So they didn't have any money to pay for travel and meals and things like that. And so it was pretty much mostly on my dime when I would go and, work for the industry, quote, quote, right? And I did that for 6 years. And I basically, you can only basically serve on council for 6 years, and unless you become the chairman. And we looked around, and a couple of us were like, you know what? I think 6 years is enough for this. And we told Josh that going in, but you know what? He was already at a good full run, so we just figured we'd let him hit the wall head on.
Here I am 12 years later. I hit the wall.
That's awesome. Hey, Joey, a little bit more about your business. Back to you got a multi-location business, which is impressive, and all of the history and the Inc. 500 and all that stuff in the past. What makes you guys unique in restyling, and what sets you apart from other companies in the field and in your area? How do you guys separate yourself in that way?
Well, I think, we're not special in the sense that I think in any market, you're going to have kind of a good, better, best group of players, right? And, obviously I'm a little bit, one-sided maybe in this, but I think we're the best. And we charge a premium price for it. And that's okay, right? But there's also a need for those other players that are offering, a service that maybe not at the same level with different level products, because that may be a budgetary need for the end consumer. I think where we try to excel, and let me preface that, because dealers, God, we love them and we hate them, right? And this is being really candid and really honest. Like, we sat around and tried to educate dealers, and maybe that sounds conceited, but to where we could offer an opportunity for them to make profit. And dealers just, sales staff in general are not very good on details. They're not very good on processes. And very few dealerships and their management teams would really take the time to invest in a model where they could sell the product. And so, a lot of us said that, we don't want to ever upset dealers because that's our primary customer. And I think COVID really, for the most part, anybody that was sitting on the fence said, you know what, we can't depend on the dealership to be the only way we sell our product. And I'm coming back full circle to that good, better, best, right? Dealers, my issue with how dealers interact with the customer is when they sell that customer a brand new vehicle, whether it be a Ford F-150 or a Toyota Camry, the customer probably wants the best product that's available. But if they don't get an option and the dealer makes a decision for them, then maybe they're getting a subpar product with a subpar installation, and they didn't make a decision. The dealer made the decision for them. And oftentimes, unfortunately, that was done to keep the price point down or increase their profits. And again, it's nothing wrong with making a profit. But we found that when you interact directly with the consumer, that our positivity, our customer satisfaction was considerably higher. And, so we still work mainly with the dealer, but we try to engage with that end user. We want to make sure that we're meeting their expectations. And that's been helpful. And I think that's maybe one thing that sets us apart. I think a lot of people look at that as being additional work. And yes, it is more work up front, but I can tell you it saves a lot of heartache down the line, right? So it's kind of like that, an ounce of, prevention's worth a pound of cure type thing.
Jesse, just to give you an example. So, what we're talking about here is a dealer will call us and say, hey, put in this DVD system. All right. Which one do you want? We have 3 options. Put in the cheapest one you got. Okay. So why? Because they don't tell us why. They don't know. We don't know if it's part of the deal and the bank won't finance it, if the customer's short on cash, or they're just trying to make money. We just do what we're told because they're our customer. They spend 20, 30 grand with us a month. So we put it in. Customer absolutely hates it. They saw one and it's got all these other features and this or that. So then they're mad. They come to us. They go, this is crazy. Then they see the other ones we have, like, why? I want that one. And so then we say, without throwing the dealer under the bus, who's our customer, well, your dealer told us to put this one in, and that's, what they did. Well, then they call the dealership. Then the dealership calls us. Put the good one in for her. You need to take care of it. You need to do this. You need to do that. And we're like, well, you told us to do that. Well, just take care of it. And I'll make it up to you later on. Just take care of this customer, right? And to Joey's point, if we would engage with the consumer first, that customer probably would even be willing to pay additional money. But the sales people at the dealership, they're just not trained to work with a third party and get the consumer what they want.
And they're short-sighted. They're not looking at the long
Yes.
picture. It's quick fix. It's hurry up, hurry up, hurry up.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and Jesse, to that point, I think maybe unique in the sense that we do a thing called PTA, right? And for those of you that are old enough to remember, Harper Valley, I say no, but it's not that, right? So I've just dated myself with the Harper Valley PTA reference, but for those of you who want to look it up,
There's an old person laughing in their car right now.
That's right. They're like, yep. But no, so PTA is a profit through accessorization, and we go in and we do a training session and we talk to people because most salespeople, even though, Josh can tell you, Jesse, if you've done it, in your experience working, if you walk into any sales training room at a dealership, there's going to be more positivity on the wall. It's like you're going to a Notre Dame game and you're getting ready to slap the wall before you walk out into the stadium, right? It's like there's a lot of rah-rah in dealerships, and there's a lot of great selling processes, and there's a lot of great engagement in how you work with the customer. The problem is it gets left in that room as soon as they walk out. And they get out on the dealership lot, and when Mr. Smith and Mrs. Smith walk up and they say, "Hey, I'm looking at a vehicle," it's a race to the cheapest price because that's just what salespeople envision in their mind, and because the customer thinks that the best price is what they ultimately are looking for. Then everybody's on this mindset, and I said, "Look, you're doing it wrong. You've got to address the need. Like if a customer comes in saying, 'I'm looking for an XLT Lariat 302A package,' do they do that? No, they say, 'I'm looking for an XLT,' and you don't ask them why. You just go show them that, or they're looking for a Lariat, or they're looking for a Laramie, right? So when that comes up, the salespeople they don't think about the needs analysis. They just go show them the vehicle, and now all of a sudden they're sitting here going, wait a minute, why do you want that vehicle? Do you really want navigation? Do you really want a sunroof? Do you really want leather?" And the customer says, "No, I just really want leather, but you got to get the sunroof and the navigation to get the leather." And if the good salespeople, and all of us have a couple of those salespeople that get it, man, they hit home runs. They have customers that are more satisfied. They, in a lot of cases, are putting them in a vehicle that costs less, and the customer's got a better payment. And to the dealership's point, the salespeople make more money because there's a thought within consumers that if you go out and you buy that $65,000 or $70,000 pickup truck, the salesperson made more money than if you bought a $55,000 to $60,000 truck. They think the cost of the truck directly relates to the income that the dealership or the salesperson makes, and that's almost opposite. If the less expensive vehicle oftentimes has greater margin potential in it, and again, back to I said earlier, the dealership should make a profit, but if you can save a consumer money by not letting them overspend on a vehicle, that's a home run and a win for both parties.
That's awesome. Wisdom. Hey, I think that about does it in terms of our time today, but Joey, this was awesome. You have like so much to share. I don't know if you'd be willing to come on for a part 2 at some point in the future, but I don't know, Josh.
It'll all be stories. One after another, because we never even talked about, his first install and why he's not an installer to this day. Same as me. You guys heard why I'm not an installer, but Joey had a similar experience. But anyway, go ahead, Jesse.
Would you agree, Josh? Should we have him back if he's willing?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. One of my mentors. That means he's really older, much older than me.
Yeah. A lot of, yeah. So, hey, just listen, well, after this first check clears for this first podcast, we'll
All
talk
right.
about the second one. But yeah, I probably
We're looking for a sponsor. It could happen.
Yeah. Tops and trends, maybe.
Wait a minute.
Awesome. Well, thanks again for being on here today. Really appreciate it. This was excellent.
No worries. Happy to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
And there you have it, another high-octane episode of the Ride and Style podcast. Revved up and ready to go. Your hosts, Jesse Stoddard and Josh Polson, shifted your automotive game into overdrive. If you're hungry for more insights, trends, and game-changing interviews from the automotive restyling universe, don't forget to hit subscribe and leave a glowing review. We'd also love for you to share this podcast with your gearheads, installers, and auto lovers network. Because remember, knowledge is power, but shared knowledge turbocharges the whole industry. For more expert resources to supercharge your business, cruise on over to autostylemarketing.com, your one-stop shop for everything automotive marketing. Until next time, keep those wheels spinning and your passion ignited. Thank you for riding in style with us. See you on the next lap.